What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? It is your host of the War Room series, Matty Peveril from Steelers Touchdown Under, from the Touchdown Under channel on YouTube, on Steelers TDU, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor as well. Really excited to come at you with another episode of Steelers War Room. Look, today it's kind of been a weird week. We're getting back in all those mock draft sort of situations. We're getting back into people are trying to now overanalyze the Steelers free agent picks, speculating on who's next. I think really the only major news in the last 48 hours as this goes live to air is really around James Pierre coming back. He wasn't given the RFA tender, despite what some Steelers.com writers might have thought that went head to head with me on Twitter about it. He wasn't given that RFA tender. He has, though, been brought back to the Steelers. You'd assume it's probably like about a $1 million less deal. So good on Pierre bringing back. I think he's a great, maybe an all right fourth. He's a great fifth cornerback. And that's kind of about probably if they draft someone where he'll kind of be in the cornerback room at the moment, where they have not cut a Keller with the spoon yet. But because it's a bit of a weird week, I wanted to go back to the roots of this show. There'll be some of you that are now subscribing to the channel. If you don't subscribe to our channel, please do. We're getting a lot more views than we are on the videos, and we have subscribers. So hopefully you're enjoying the content. Hopefully you're more than willing to give us a go for more than one of those episodes. So do subscribe if you haven't already. Likewise, hit a like if you like the content. Hit a don't like if you don't like the content. It tells us what we need to do differently. And at the same time, if you are really enjoying the content, you want to hit the bell icon to get all the notifications, please do as well. As I said, we're available on audio too, from Apple, Anchor, and Spotify. But I want to get back to the roots of this show when it was on the Steel Curtain Network, and talk about some of the team building, talk about some of the stats side of things, mesh it all together. So I wanted to give you sort of three things in this week's episode. I want to quickly talk about offensive benchmarks based on 2022 and where the Steelers need to uplift, and sort of puts in context some of the free agents they've acquired on offense and whether they're going to help them in this regard. The second thing I've got is a quick player comparison with the juicy 5 guys against Elandon Roberts. I thought that was kind of cool. If those of you that saw my Cole Holcomb reaction video, you would have seen me bring up my stat head comparison tool. Or we definitely used it with Patrick Peterson. I've done the same thing. I've compared him to 5 players, a couple of previous Steelers players, recently on the roster, and a couple of other people around the league as well. So kind of interesting. Actually, no, they're all ex-Steelers players. That's right. I defaulted away from that. And then on the third part, I just wanted to look at sort of the 3 tiers of Steeler draft picks from 2021 and how good a season did they have, because they're all going into their third year. And like most of them on the offense, particularly the top guys in terms of where they were drafted in that draft. So that's kind of the interesting thing that I wanted to look at today. So let's crack straight into it. Let's start off with the benchmark side of things. So when we look at the benchmarks, basically if you go through the 2022 season rankings, the Steelers were 23rd in offensive yards. So that's obviously really got to improve. We need them to be, top 18 there, if not top half, top 16. They were 13th in passes completed. So they were accurate in that regard. That's great. They were 24th in pass yards, though. So when you think about that, it's like, well, actually, cool, they completed passes, but how do they get that better? Obviously, we had the challenges with Mitch Trubisky wouldn't pull the trigger. Then we had Kenny Pickett trying to, keep himself upright behind the line, who didn't do a bad job, but they weren't the best line in the league by any stretch. And he was kind of finding his feet in a Canada offense, which I still debate what that even looks like, whether that's the fit. But anyway, they've got to improve that. They've got to get better than that, particularly if Kenny's, the starter coming off full off-season, Steelers getting used to players, etc., etc. He didn't have that last year. He was basically the third depth quarterback up until mid-preseason games. It's too late in the piece. They were 32nd in TDs last. They were dead last with 12 TDs. Now, to give you an idea, the top team in the league had 41 TDs. That's got to improve. That they need to be in the top 20 at least to pass TDs. I don't care if they're running a lot of they're running the football a lot. The rush attack is where they're finding their points. They have to be able to score points in the passing game. That is how you're going to keep up in the AFC North with not just AFC North, but really the AFC. You've got to be able to put points on the board. You saw that from Kansas City Chiefs this year. I've said it with Mark on the Touchdown show we had when it was back on the Steel Curtain Network, which was formerly behind the Steel Curtain. And I said that, like, almost 2 years ago now, he won a show where he brought up the defense and just how good they could be. And I said, it kind of doesn't matter. You've got to be able to score 30 points to progress in the AFC side of the playoffs. That stays the same. So they got to get better at this TD mark. Interceptions, they were 16th. So mid-range there. I think they actually had 16 interceptions off the top of my head. So nothing too bad there. If Kenny can clean that up, and let's say Kenny can throw for like 26 TDs and like 14 or 12 interceptions or less, that's a really good season. So yeah, really excited if you can kind of keep that 2.225 or 2.5 TDs to interception ratio in his year 2. I think this Steelers team are going to be really, really good. And I think they're going to be able to win 11, 12 games and they get you into the playoffs. Then they were 17th for first downs. Now, I was actually a bit surprised about that. That's a good thing. That means that the passing attack's working when it does get going. So I think when you look at this, they're kind of in the top 20 for 4 of the 6 categories I talked about. And they're top 25. For 3 of the categories. They're top 25 in 5 of the categories. Obviously, they're dead last in 1 when it comes to pass TDs. You'd expect that to improve a little bit. The next one up from them was 15 TDs, which was the New York Jets. So my goal for them is basically anywhere where they're top 20, how do they get to top 12? And anywhere that they're 23rd, 24th, or 32nd in this scenario, that they get into the top 20. If they do that, this team really should win another 1 or 2 games and finish with at least 11 wins, double-digit wins, make the playoffs. On the rushing side of the offense, the Steelers were 10th in attempts. They were 16th in yards, so we need the yard average to go up. We were pretty low on the yard average scale. I did see it, but I've not taken down my notes. We were 14th in TDs. Again, that's got to improve. And we were 9th in first downs. So for this, we are all the top half of the league, except for the yards, per attempt. We got to get top 10 for all 4 categories I've mentioned, and I'd say top half of the league for yards per average. If we're going to allow Kenny to grow, and Kenny's going to grow effectively, and we're going to get the most out of a third-year Naji, the most out of the investments made in the offensive line, this has got to improve. So the reason I bring that up, as I said earlier to start the show, is obviously the Steelers have acquired Nate Herbig. Obviously, the Steelers have acquired Isaac Seumalo. The rumor now is are they going to go after a tackle in the draft? This is really important that they're getting guys in that can improve the status quo. Again, we've got depth at running back. Obviously, tight end's a bit of an issue now. I think they'll find a way to bring back Gentry on a cut price deal as low as they can. Then I think you're drafting a tight end, this is the right draft, the best draft in years to draft a tight end. And so, yeah, that's what I find exciting. But the investments need to be made in this O-line, and now we've got to see if this comes to fruition in the run game. Cool. All right, so with that, we're going to move over to the second component of what I wanted to share with everyone on today's show. So here we go. So this is called StatHead. Now, StatHead is a paid tool if you are not familiar with it. That we basically you can sign up with Pro Football Reference. It's about $8 a month. I love this tool. It makes me doing the shows really easy. Saves me doing a lot of categorization that I used to have to do. There's all sorts of things you can test. I really like the comparison tool. I think it's pretty cool. And you used to only be able to do 3 players of certain stats for free. I don't know if you can do that because I've been using StatHead now for someone, but this one gives you 6 comparisons. So depending on what size of screen you got, basically we got 6 players here. You can follow along with me. You don't have to follow along the screen. And you get a hint of when we're talking about to come in terms of those guys that were drafted in 2021. But we're going to measure Elandon Roberts, I thought, against Devin Bush, Miles Jack, Robert Spillane, Vince Williams, and Avery Williamson. So all Steelers draft picks. So not draft picks, all Steelers players. I've done it based on the last year that they played. I think I thought that was a pretty cool way to do it. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Now, obviously, remember Bush and Roberts played 17 games each, so that's going to be a little bit in their favor from a total tackle count. But we will have at least some per game stats that we can use as well. So in terms of, and this is 1 year production, it's not career, obviously. So in terms of production, Avery Williamson had the highest there. He played for 2 teams. He was like for the Jets and the Steelers in 2020. He was kind of like the green dot, I'm not mistaken, for the Jets too. So like obviously had quite a big role there. Elandon Roberts, though, is second there on that chart based on last year, ahead of Jack, ahead of Spillane, ahead of, Vince Williams, ahead of Devin Bush. So this kind of surprised me as well. Like I knew he was a tackling machine, but for me, I kind of sat there and went, well, yeah, he's still to me a third linebacker behind someone that I think they're going to draft in the first 3 rounds, especially remember Terrell Edmonds. This is really good. We need this in the AFC North, particularly with Mark Robinson still coming on. So I was really happy to see that there were 68 solo tackles there. He was second on the assisted tackles, so that was great. Quarterback hits, he was top-notch there. Again, that means the guy can blitz. 10 sacks. That was pretty cool for me. 10 tackles for a loss. 4.5 sacks. This surprised me. I haven't heard anyone. Maybe it's something I've missed. I've listened to a lot of Steelers content. I watch a lot of Steelers content in all different forms. I were on there in Steelers, the crazy mean land of Steelers Twitter. I haven't seen anyone talking about the sack count with Elandon Roberts. 4.5 sacks is pretty, and maybe they have, but I haven't heard it. 4.5 sacks, big deal from Elandon Roberts there. That's massive. When we look at the per game averages as well, Elandon Roberts is kind of up there, just behind Miles Jack, but obviously played more games, so then he's got to hit more stats there. Avery Williamson was higher in 2020, but as I said, he was like the number 1 linebacker for the Jets. That wasn't Elandon Roberts' role last year with Miami. Sack average, Elandon Roberts the highest again. So yes, Avery Williamson was higher because he had 2 interceptions that year. But really, when you look at this overall, 1 interception, that's right. There you go. It's above. When you look at this overall, Elandon Roberts is the best from this mix. Better than anything the Steelers had last year in the linebacking core. Better than when we had Vince Williams in there, and he's a Vince Williams player, and I love Vince Williams. I remember he couldn't record himself Vince to be part of the Killer Bees. He wanted to be part of Killer Bees back in, I think it was 2018. And, so that's awesome. Or the 2017 season, but I think he said it in 2018. But anyway, so Elandon Roberts is being a lot more value, and there's some surprising stuff here. So if you're not that high on the Elandon Roberts, sort of pickup, some people are cranky because he got 50. My mate Marky D, my co-host on the Touchdown Under Boys, also on Mad Monday, he put it on his channel, Steel Nation Oz, around people shouldn't be upset that Elandon Roberts got 15. At the end of the day, 50, sorry, Shazier's number. Ultimately, Delonte Scott and Malik Reed have both had that number as well. So there's no point getting upset about something that's not worth getting upset about. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I just am really excited by the Roberts pickup now. And I'm kind of keen to see, because if this is your third like linebacker, this spells good things for the Steelers. It really, really does. Okay, cool. Well, next we're going to move to the players that were drafted in 2021. Now, one person I haven't put in here is Kendrick Green, because he basically did absolutely zero last year. A lot of Steel fans don't like him. There's no point me spending time talking to you about him, particularly when we're going to try and keep this to like a quick 20-minute hit your sort of show. We're just actually start with the tier 3 guys. So Trey Norwood. Now, I was hoping that, if you rewound back to the start of the 2022 season, most people would have said, hey, Trey Norwood had a really good rookie year after being drafted 245th overall in the 7th round, the back end of the 7th. Hopefully he can come on and do something. I mean, the Steelers did bring KZ in, so that changed the game, but KZ was also injured for, 5 or 6 games. Trey Norwood didn't have a better year. He wasn't as involved. He certainly didn't improve. When you look at a tackle count from a stats perspective, fairly similar. Tackles for loss was fairly similar. His AV was similar. Approximation value. No interceptions on the year. No pass defenses in terms of how he was used. He literally played like minimal games in terms of minimal snaps in games that he played in. Less than 26% of the snaps in the games he played in. The year before, it was a third of the snaps. So he's basically moved from 1 in 3 snaps to 1 in 4. That kind of tells you where it's got to be. Maybe the Steelers used him a lot in 2021 because they had nothing else. That could be the narrative out on him. But you'd like to kind of see Trey Norwood step up in preseason and fight his way onto the roster. I wonder as well whether they considered moving him to a cornerback position, but it's with his 40-yard time, also with like what I've seen from him and his catching skills and getting in there, I don't really like it. Maybe they think about him in the slot a bit more. That's something that they could look at with Sutton gone. It's hard to say, but he would be, if you would have ranked them in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, he's probably a tier 3 production there. Now, I've got Quincy Roche on the board. Now, Quincy Roche, people go, hang on, wasn't he a giant? Well, he was drafted by the Steelers in the 6th round. I never wanted us to lose him. I couldn't believe the narrative around Jimmy Jones just from the preseason, and that led to Quincy Roche being off the roster. He had ended up having a good 2021 for the Giants, where he had a forced fumble, 2.5 sacks, had about over 50 tackles. 38 tackles combined. 5 tackles for a loss, 5 quarterback hits. That was pretty cool from him. Really, really good performance. He had a bunch of sacks, over 40 in 3 years at Temple. I really thought Quincy Roche was going to potentially be something for the Steelers as a 3rd or 4th rotational piece. Wasn't to be. I think the Steelers wanted him to end up on the practice squad as soon as they cut him to get down to the 53-man roster. He was picked up by the Giants. The Steelers managed to bring him back now on the futures contract. So I'm interested to see what he can do. He didn't have as good a year but he had some injuries, and then he floated on the practice squad as well in 2022. Only played 3 games, didn't really record any like stats of note apart from like 2 tackles. Hopefully the Steelers can find a way to bring him back into the fold and, getting some production there. But because of if he had a similar year to what he had in 2021, I would have put him in there as a tier 2, but he's kind of a tier 3 draft pick from 2021. All right, so classifying the next guy, which again, I'm going to say he went backwards a bit, particularly if I think about what my old friend from Steel Curtain Network, Jeffrey Benedict, said, and that is around Isaiah Loudermilk. Not as many stats, only started 3 games or played in 3 games, like had majority snaps in 3 games, or more snaps in 3 games, but however you want to put it. Played in 11 games, no sacks, like hardly any tackles. He looked like he was floundering at times. He's probably a reason the Steelers are really, really are looking at DT or defensive end quite, as prominent in this draft. Not just because Wormley, will probably be leaving, although I think they'll find a way to keep him. And Alawala is retiring. Obviously, they brought in Montrevious Adams, who did really well from them in 2021. So he got more snaps in 2022. I just think Loudermilk, we've got to see more from him. He's not really ever lived up to them trading a 5th, the 5th to come back into the draft to grab him in 2021, trading the 2022 pick. Cool. So then we're going to move to the 1 tier 2 player I have, who I do think, if you caught the show I did earlier in the week with Mark, I talked about the fact I do think the Steelers should bring in a punter to challenge him. But Percy Harvin, his net yards per punt went up in 2022. So did and net yards per punt as well. Touchbacks was a little bit higher. In the 20 went down, so that was kind of disappointing, I thought, and both in percentage and the number of times, the frequency. His yards per punt went up by 2 yards, which when you're at the 44 marks, not too bad. He did punt for over 3,000 yards. We'd prefer he punted for 1 yard and once, but that's not how the NFL works. It is a professional league. Look, I've kind of find it interesting. Whether how many fans hated on Jordan Berry. Yes, he did shank it from time to time, but his stats have been pretty similar. I just think they need to keep looking at the punter position. You can always, at least challenge Harvin to get a bit better. I kind of thought he would have a bit of a jump in year 2. He didn't have it that. He didn't get worse. He did get a little bit better, but not enough for me to consider him a tier 1 player. All right, so the next guy we're going to get into is Dan Moore Jr. And so Dan Moore Jr., obviously starting left tackle, played all the games for Steelers last year, had an AV of 8, which is pretty high. Played 1160 snaps, played 100% of the snaps. 7 penalties, for him. Sorry, 9 penalties. 9 penalties according to Pro Football Reference. Pro Football Focus had him at 7 penalties. 10 penalties, sorry. So 4 of them were holding, 4 false start, 1 offside. If you look at it from Pro Football Reference for his 9 penalties, I trust them over Pro Football Focus. That's just what I truly believe. The where though that we're going to go off Pro Football Focus because Pro Football Reference doesn't have the sacks that he allowed. They don't really cover that. But Dan Moore Jr. according to Pro Football Focus allowed 7 sacks. I'm putting him in there because he started all those games, and I'm going to go into a bit of his pressures and stuff. But he was tied 7th in the league for the most sacks. 7 sacks is a lot of sacks. That can't happen this year, and that's probably why the Steelers will look to upgrade, particularly if a guy like Broderick Jones is available at 17. They've got to get better. They can't have 5 sacks. So Dan Moore can't allow more than 5 sacks in the season. It should be no more than 3. That's going to get your quarterback, killed, and we don't want that. So Dan Moore, I put him up there in the tier 1, but he was almost in the tier 2 because of the 7 sacks. Cool. So we're going to move to Naji Harris. He had 1,263 yards from the line of scrimmage. That was a 400 or so yard loss on the previous year. Yeah, that's right, 404 yard loss. So he dropped down about 25% of his yards. He was obviously injured or playing through an injury with steel plate in his boot. Had the same amount of touchdowns as he had in 2021. Had about 170 yards less. His yards per average was about the same. Yards per game was 10 yards down, so that's got to improve. We want him to be averaging like 80, not 60. He did 70 in his rookie year. His targets and receptions were a lot lower, which I kind of found interesting. His catch rate was about the same. I said frequently throughout the season, Naji should have been getting more passes in the short game. I never thought Trubisky was really looking at him. I thought they could have done more to work him in for Kenny to be more of a safety blanket like he was for Ben. I'd like to see that, particularly with the road graders that we're getting now on the offensive line, and Siamalu and Herbig with Daniels. Like, if you're getting Najee gaining lots of yards in the run game, how are we bringing him in? How are we using play action for Freiermuth and like Pickens and even Najee, where the running back sprints off? But also, how are we threatening? Are we setting up in like a run formation and then Najee like spreads out to the side? That's what I want to see from Najee this year. I'd like to see those targets go to like 70 targets with like 50 receptions. That would be good. I don't want him to have 74, 80 receptions like in 2021, but I do think getting 50 receptions out of Najee would be really good. He had 3 TDs receiving. Look, if he can get 4 or 5 there, that'd be great. Basically, I think Najee wants to be getting about 15 TDs overall for the year. That's what we got to get him to get value out of where he was picked in the draft, particularly when he's going into a year 3. And hopefully he can stay healthy through this off-season process. And he's just a big unit. I do have him in my tier 1 because he's still Mr. Dependable. I do think when you're producing 12 to 1,500 yards from the line of scrimmage, that's massive. He did have 70 less touches this year, which is a good thing, and that is a little bit responsible for why his yardage goes down. We saw the, sort of Jalen Warren come on there and help him out. I think Jalen Warren had over 400 yards. So there's kind of a little bit of his shortfall. Playing 70 less touches is a big deal. 70, he literally has dropped down almost 20% plus over 20, almost 25%, which kind of matches the yards of scrimmage. It's funny. But by easing that load, we're going to get more from Naji over the 5 years that we've got him under that rookie contract. So that's a really key thing that I am really happy about. And you see that in the 16 versus 18 attempts. I still think you want to be getting him, 16 to 18 attempts rushing. I just do think we need to lift the receptions up and look at how he's making big plays. But even those sets where he and Warren on the field together, I think can cause a real headache. If the Steelers go get another blocking tight end or a guy that can do both things, that could be pretty wild. And I do think the Steelers will get a tight end earlier than what a lot of people expect in this draft, purely because of also the Matt Canada offense. All right, cool. I said we'd try and keep it to 20, 25 minutes. We're on last guy to review. We're going to be a little bit over. But Pat Freiermuth, one of my favorite players of all the Steelers, got one of his jerseys at Christmas time, so happy about that. Look, quick things to note with him. His yards went up by about 230, 40, which is really, really cool for him. TDs went down from 7 to 2. That's a little bit to do with the quarterback position. That's a little bit to do with the fact that red zone offense wasn't as good. I think if you ask Pat, he'd probably trade the 5 TDs, the 200 yards for 5 TDs instead. I actually wanted to see him produce. I'd said this at the end of 2021. I wanted to see him get to between 7 and 800 and like 5 to 8 TDs. Missed that on the TDs, but he's capable of getting that yardage. And I think he's going to be even better with that in 2023, particularly without Claypool in the mix. So really, I think for Pat, he's got to continue to catch the football, win those combat catches, get that catch percentage back up into the 70 plus range as well. I think that's going to be really important. He had the same number of receptions this year, so the percentage was lower in terms of his catch rate percentage, but overall he had the same amount of receptions. So it shows that he was being used deeper as well, because in 2021 it was average of 8.3 yards per reception. This year in 2022 it was 11.6. So that shows that massive upgrade there. He had more first downs. He had a much higher long, getting a lot more involved in that passing game. Obviously, when you're a rookie too, teams don't necessarily scheme for you as much as they will a year 2 player, guy that's a top 5 tight end in the league. So that's something that I think really important for Pat to continue to develop on this year. Had a good AV score, which showed how he did against his fellow tight ends. Look, it can't be a perfect year every year, but I do really think that Pat Freiermuth is going to have a bigger role in 2023, and you're going to find a real chemistry with Kenny Pickett. And it's just, that phrase, you'll love to see it. So yeah, nothing else I can say about Pat, but I think he is still to this date our top performing pick from the 2021 draft. People might find that surprising, but when you think about Naji Harris, I just think what Pat Freiermuth has done for this offense is pretty incredible from the tight end spot, with Ben, with a much older quarterback arm, with the quarterback, the stabilization at the start of the season this year, rookie quarterback coming in. Maybe it's a tight competition, but for me, he's lived up to it. I know people are still upset the Steelers didn't get Creed Humphrey. You could have said, why didn't the Steelers get Creed Humphrey, the 24th pick in the draft? So anyway, of 2021. Regardless, have how you see it. Both these guys, Pat Freiermuth and Naji Harris, are tier 1 players for the Steelers from the 2021 draft. There's some things to keep in mind as we go forward into this year's draft. Hopefully it's a big day. Hopefully there's a couple in the next few days. Hopefully there's a couple more signings. Mark and I will be back with you guys live your Friday night in the US on Steelers Touchdown Under. Subscribe and hit the bell icon. You'll get that notification when we go live. It'll be our usual Touchdown Under Boys show, and we're looking forward to having a massive show. As always, if you've got any questions, suggestions, any ideas of what you want us to talk about, you can email me at AussieSteeler91, which is on your screen right now, at gmail.com. Obviously, all lowercase for the text. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts. But otherwise, have a good week, guys.